And finally, my friends, we have reached Nepal news. We don't often think about Nepal here in the West unless we're planning to go full Edmund Hillary and claim that we climbed to the top of Everest without the help of a local Sherpa. Everest at this point is basically the Disneyland of mountains. You queue for hours, you get ripped off by concessions, and the lucky ones die halfway. So the world, it's fair to say, was collectively surprised when Nepal suddenly gave us the sort of political drama we usually see in a Netflix documentary or a university lecture about the collapse of 17th century empires, if you follow my meaning. Nepal's deadliest outbreak of political violence in decades, as a group of mostly Gen Z protesters took to the streets of Kathmandu and other cities, prompted over widespread allegations of corruption and sparked by a social media ban. Because a good mob is like watching The Wire. It takes a while to get going, but once you're into it, you're never going to turn back. Now, you are right to be a bit hesitant in picking a side when you hear about citizens storming some form of capital in recent years. It hasn't exactly always turned out that they had the best interests of that country at heart. And I know when you hear mob in the capital, your knee-jerk reaction is cautious at best. There's been a glut of revolutions recently, and sometimes the people in the streets are exactly the sort of people who would be keen to hang a "do not resuscitate" sign on their local democracy. But the weird part is, these guys, they're actually fighting to make the country better. Shock horror, I know. Yeah, you heard right. There was an angry mob, and don't get me wrong, it was trying to overthrow the government, but it was trying to overthrow a corrupt government. Which, if you're keeping score at home, makes it a revolution rather than a very determined spring cleaning attempt. This is so rare. It's really given late 18th century France energy. Seems in the French Revolution we did class action so well that we decided that we nailed it. But I guess it's only revolution when it comes from the late 18th century region of France. Otherwise, it's just simply called sparkling chaos. What they call woke nonsense and ungrateful disobedience in certain news circles. And occasionally Latin America would flare up with a bad case of sparkling chaos, but they would quickly put them back down, unfortunately. Mostly when we are seeing countries recreate the second best Captain America film, we see it in the background of some form of influencer video, and this hasn't exactly changed this time around.
This is not for social media, this is for corruption.
Yes, I know, I've heard. Yeah. For the kids that were flaunting their wealth or something.
Because people are saying this is for social media, no. Yeah. This is for like corruption. Yeah. Because our our brother and sister, 17, 18, they just died.
Yeah, they've just been shot.
They're murdered.
Yeah, I know.
The sparkling chaos, the ungrateful disobedience might not be televised, but it will get you a lot of views. It might even get you elevated to the monetization program. Or, if you stream the wrong revolution, I guess it'll get you demonetized. So, it's up to you which one you stream. Now, as that young man alluded to, the protest took place after the government banned social media. They claimed that this was because the companies had not registered in the country. The registration requirement had been motivated in part as a way to enable the enforcement of a new digital service tax and the stricter value-added tax rules on foreign e-service providers in an effort to boost revenue. However, critics allege the shutdown was prompted by something else.
In Nepal, a generation fed up with corruption and inequality turned to social media, sharing viral posts under hashtags like Nepo Kids that exposed political privilege. But when the government tried to silence them by blocking Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube and other major platforms, Gen Z did not back down.
Ah yes! Nepotism! The official national pastime of way too many democracies. Why are we attacking Nepo babies? I don't understand. Sure, it wasn't the best Muppets spin-off, but it's definitely more fun than the 2020s Muppets Now, right? That was a terrible spin-off of the Muppets, and I'm just... What's that? Oh, Nepo babies. Sorry, not Muppet babies. That's that's not the same thing at all. That was very embarrassing. But I stand by what I said about Muppets Now. It was a terrible spin-off. That being said, I think we're due for a new Muppets attempt. Maybe we get one of those going. Anyway, I don't see why a social media trend highlighting nepotism, focusing on the undue privileges enjoyed by the children and relatives of influential political leaders, would have prompted the ruling government to completely shut down social media channels under the guise of non-compliance. That doesn't make sense to me. Could be worse. They could be forcing citizens to upload their government ID or their literal face on the internet to access certain websites. I get it, you know. You spend 360 years telling everybody that they need to respect the people who only get into power because they were related to the current batch of people who were in power. And for no other reason. But hey, that's a completely normal thing. That's the way many countries run, right? So when you've operated like that for so long, people just sort of expect that that's the best way to run. But however, when their royal reign ended in 2008, the same year that Paris Hilton had just been cast in a musical despite her demonstrated lack of ability to sing or act, Keeping Up with the Kardashians would start their relentless pursuit of taking up every screen all at once at any possible time that they could, and Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop had only just started to dream of creating a vagina-scented candle or putting a jade egg in the yonis of women the world over. It did seem like the golden age of Nepo babies would be going ahead unimpeded and overpraised. No wonder that they thought nobody would question it if they don't have to earn their jobs in government. Makes sense. The government's decision to ban social media platforms served as the immediate catalyst to the unrest. Because nothing says, we're definitely not corrupt, like banning people from pointing out that you're corrupt. You know, people say that slacktivism and hashtags never get anything done, but when your leaders are so thin-skinned that the mere act of criticizing them means that they will then go out of their way to ban platforms that host criticism of them or outspoken critics, then you force us to take the next step. That's like responding to bad Yelp reviews by burning down the entire internet. Seems disproportionate. Yeah, you stopped the hashtags, but you created actual mobs. Congratulations, you invented the world's worst trade-off. You could have just had a bunch of useless hashtags and people complaining online, and maybe even marching in the streets, and it would have remained the kind of thing that feels good but changes nothing. Like weekly marches to try and get the Western governments to sanction Israel. A beautiful idea mired by complete ineffectualness. But then you had to go and have a cry, didn't you? Throw a big old tantrum and take away the one thing that made them feel like they were doing something. If they'd have had social media in the 60s, the Summer of Love would have been the hashtag of love, and we'd all be wondering why nothing changed. But you overreached, didn't you? They always overreach. And with all social media shut down, surely there would be nowhere for these kids to gather, he asked in a leading and knowing manner.
Gen Z did not back down. Instead, they got creative, switching to platforms like BitChat and Discord to organize rallies, hold live-stream debates, vote on an interim prime minister, and keep their movement alive offline and online.
Uh-oh! They were using Discord. Discord? The platform invented so lonely men could coordinate night raids in video games has now turned into the tool that coordinated daylight riots in real life. A Discord coup. Fuck. That's like if democracy was saved by your nephew's Fortnite squad. Only in 2025 could the downfall of a government begin with the words, "Press F to pay respects in the chat." Don't get me wrong, I love this. I do, absolutely. But I want to note that Discord was originally a platform for gamers to chat. And having a gaming platform as the savior of democracy is like having a sovereign citizen prepper save democracy, you know? They're not the expected hero of this scenario. Like, I'm absolutely glad it happened, but I'd never have been the one to turn to them in the first place to save us. And I can hear your grandpa saying, "Oh, these kids can't do anything without social media. They can't even hold a coup. Back in my day, we mobilized in the streets, and you actually had to talk to people to know what was going on." And to that we say, this is why you took so long to do everything, you old fuck. The world has changed. This is a generation for whom digital services are central, not only to communication, identity and political expression, but also to education and economic opportunities. There has been such rampant corruption in the upper echelons, people had to create their own economic opportunities. Social media platforms drove roughly 80% of total online traffic in Nepal and serve as vital channels for businesses and communication. After platforms got banned, people used VPNs to access those banned platforms and issued calls to action that reached tens of thousands of young people. Those actions were so vital that the kids of Nepal overturned the government in only 5 days. In, out, bada bing, bada boom, no fucking around. 5 days is very impressive. The US spent 20 years in Afghanistan and all they toppled was their own reputation. They even used the Discord platform to hold their election. And boy, it has to be the most online thing that has ever happened. Can we take a look, please?
A single server on Discord named Youth Against Corruption drew over 100,000 participants and became the heart of the movement. The server hosted a debate on Nepal's next interim Prime Minister, which was also streamed live on national TV and other digital platforms.
I mean, look at that. Just look at it. It's going to be the first time that an election has included emojis and GIFs as part of their official political discourse. And the poop one was actually legally binding. I would say that there's maybe one exception, and that is Australian donkey voting, of course. Because sometimes you hit on a thing early, but it takes someone else to just escalate it to the logical conclusion, just really take it to the next level. And you know, that even though the election was broadcast on TV, there was somebody who was definitely not included in that group chat. That's how group chats work, right? There's always a second group chat about the group chat. And if you don't know about the second group chat, that's because they want to talk about you, my friend, and I'm very sorry. I guess in this case, it was like former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli who was left out of the group chat because they were definitely talking about them. The protests centered around anger and the corruption that's so prevalent in Nepalese parliament, which has been simmering for decades just under the surface and has seen Nepal ranked 107 out of 180 countries in Transparency International's latest corruption percentage index. And I don't know if I have a lot of numberologists in my audience, in the listeners, but I did extensive research into this, and I can confidently tell you that number is quite low on that list. 107 out of 180? Woo! Really low. And because I know that we can't go more than 5 minutes without referencing ourselves, yes, I did look. Australia is ranked 10 on the list. Okay, you happy now? We talked about us. Let's get back to the story. This group was such a perpetually online bunch of nerds that their leader was actually a former DJ. And at this point, why not, eh? In a world where so much politics is a performance, the person who used to read the room for music now reads the room for anger. At least the DJ knows how to drop something other than bombs. And their symbol of resistance is the one-piece pirate flag. The Straw Hat Jolly Roger. Look at that bad boy. Look at him. Now, if you've never heard of One Piece, because you were busy being the president of Cool Guys and having so much sex in high school club, or just didn't want to commit to it, because as of right now there are over 1,000 episodes. You understand how big of a commitment that is? 1,000 episodes of anything. Even The Simpsons hasn't hit 1,000 episodes yet. And there's something, I think, quietly beautiful about a movement led by a DJ and waved along by pirate flags. Like, it's global youth culture saying, we will meme your corruption into obsolescence. So now, we have a model. A handful of young people, tech native, creative, and morally furious, who use modern tools to make a very old demand. Accountability. Non-negotiable. They did it in 5 days. No wonder they had to use Discord. That wasn't a protest. That was a speed run of a revolution. They had to give each other tips on how to best get through the speed run, you know? You should know the cartoonish skull on the black banner has increasingly become a protest icon in parts of Asia. It's not just in Nepal. It was first used in Indonesian trucker protests, which actually makes a lot of sense to me, because these guys are spending hours alone on the road. 1,000 episodes of anything isn't daunting to someone who's facing a 12-hour drive. That's just finally meeting somebody who can keep up with you. Then it spread to protests in Nepal, the Philippines, and France has even started adopting the flag as a symbol of freedom, defiance, and a growing movement against corruption, as youth resistance against injustice and authoritarianism. It's spreading, guys. It's very exciting. There isn't a single Western cartoon that I can think of that would have a similar capacity to light a fire under the asses of the general population. Actually, sorry, no. There is one. I take that back. A cartoon of such singular importance. Love for it has been passed down from generation to generation. It has spawned endless seasons and remakes. A show that has never showed violence in any form except the overturning of corruption. I'd go so far as to say it inspired the entire true crime genre. And that show? Scooby-Doo! Roro! That's right, Raggy. From day one, Scooby-Doo was all about showing the youth that most of the world's issues were caused by corrupt capitalists. The problems were solved by precocious and dope-smoking youth who travelled the countryside in a van because even in the 60s, nobody could afford to pay rent. They let the next generation know the truth, that monsters don't exist. They are just the lies that those in power use to cover up their own crimes. We need a flag here in the West that we can unite under. Something that we've seen, something that we understand, that we can believe in, and has always had our best interests at heart. The Mystery Machine. If I see another protest going through the city, be it an attempt to free Palestine, to fight civil rights, or simply because they are shutting down your favourite bubble tea place, and there isn't a Mystery Machine flag proudly flying in the centre of that march, I will consider it all for nothing, and we will have to burn it all down and start over. Fortunately, climate change has, for most of us, covered that for a good majority of the near future. And we already know that they are cracking down on climate protests, so we won't expect to see another one of those with a Mystery Machine flag in our lifetime. So I think it's a perfect time to sort of blend all these ideas together.